Do you know the first question I consistently get from clients about moving to Bend? I'll give you a hint. It's not about schools, it's not about property taxes, and it's not even asking to see if I did something different with my hair today. It's about wildfire. Good old wildfire. It's the talk of the town, right? And you know why? Because fire is real. It's scary and it's a big unknown, especially if you're not used to living on the West Coast. You're not used to this new normal that we all have come to deal with here on the West Coast of wildfire. So that's why in this video, we're breaking down how real is the fire danger here in Bend? How bad is the smoke really? And what's up with insurance? Can you actually get it? I've lived here in Oregon for 15 years, and I've personally had to actually evacuate multiple times from different places around the state that I've lived. In the Columbia River Gorge, Mackenzie Bridge. Living here in Bend, I've never personally had to evacuate, but some people have. And so that's why we want to break all of this down in this video so you have a really good sense of what the real risk with wildfire, smoke, and insurance is here in Central Oregon. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Luke Callahan. I'm a realtor here in Bend, and I specialize in helping people like you make the move here to Bend every single day. And I know it's a big decision to move here, even if it's just buying a second house, and you want to make sure you make a wise investment and that your investment doesn't literally burn down, right? So that's why we're covering some serious ground here and to make sure that you make a wise decision. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so first up, let's talk about wildfires burning things down. And what's the talk of the town right now? What's the talk of the nation? Spokane, Washington. Now, granted, that's not Central Oregon, but it's a parable. So far this year, Spokane, there's been over 900 structures that have burned and over 10,000 acres that have burned. I mean, this is no joke. This is a real deal, and this is everybody's greatest fear, whether it's Spokane, Bend, Portland, Seattle. It could happen anywhere, and so we want to be informed about what's going on. So that's the deal with Spokane. Let's talk a little bit about what's happened in Bend this year, the past few years, and then we'll talk a bit about the two most significant fires in Bend's history over the last 30 years. So this year, the Akawa Butte fire just north of Sisters truly could have burned Sisters down. It popped off, and within a week, it was nearly 20,000 acres. But what was significant is that it was moving south, and it was directly north of Sisters, and with it marching south, while the town of Sisters didn't directly have to evacuate, I have friends who did evacuate just because the winds were so consistent, and it seemed like Sisters is on the path, and you just don't know when it's going to happen. The fire comes knocking at your door, and so to understand fire, we need to understand wind. And to understand wind, you need to understand earth. Cue the earth, wind, and fire coming to Edgefield in September. So I couldn't not do that joke because who doesn't love earth, wind, and fire, especially with September? So anyways, cue the music. Earth, wind, and fire. Okay. But seriously, fire is all about fuel and oxygen, and what fuels it more than anything is wind. How fire works here in Central Oregon is we get a thunderstorm rolling through midsummer, like June, July, and it brings a little bit of rain, but it's usually like an ounce of rain and a pound of fire. And these lightning strikes, they start dropping into our sage country, the juniper, the ponderosas, and then fires start. And oftentimes lots of fires start. So you can't just go around and put them all out. We have to navigate which ones we're going to put out. Obviously we want to contain them all, but that's just the nature of the beast. You're battling like a 100-head Medusa on any given summer, and you have to know which one to put resources to when resources are scarce, right? So now we have all these fires that have started, and the way to put them out, we got two main ways to put them out here. We put the wet stuff on the red stuff. You know, you get the helicopters flying with the buckets or the big, beautiful planes scooping out of the reservoirs and then spraying that on, or you get a bunch of young bucks with mustaches and you have them dig lines around, literally out there with Pulaskis and backpacks and water bottles, and it's a lot of work, right? And then they sit back and say, hey, don't you dare cross that line, fire. But sure enough, sometimes the fire does cross it. And you know what causes it to cross it faster than anything? A wind event, right? So the big name of the game here is these fires start. We try to contain them. We try to draw those lines around and put them out if they're super high priority, because obviously that costs a lot to dump water on them. And then we just pray that they don't spread quickly. They start in July, and a lot of them don't go out until the rains or the snow comes in October or even November. And so we're just dealing with this unknown of fires burning for 3 or 4 months. And, you know, usually they're benign, but if we get a big wind event heading towards town, there's not a lot you can do to stop it depending on the severity of the wind, the humidity of the air with the wind. Low humidity, strong winds, it can burn it right down. So the big thing to understand here is where is the prevailing wind on any given area or any given fire blowing. Here in Bend, we have a pretty consistent prevailing wind that's kind of coming off the leeward side of the mountains, the leeward side of the Cascades, kind of comes from south of town, definitely west of town, and then blows east and north, right? So with that Sisters fire, while I was getting clients calling all day, every day saying, hey, have you evacuated? Are you concerned? Sisters is northwest of Bend. For the most part, I mean, it was an anomaly for it to be marching south towards Sisters, but then the winds changed and then it started blowing east, which is why Prineville's covered in smoke, Sisters didn't burn down, and that's the way it goes. And that's the prevailing wind predominantly, is pretty much heading east with a little bit of north action. And because Sisters is northwest of us, and because Akawa Butte Fire is north of Sisters and northwest of us, it's never been a huge concern that it's going to march its way to Bend. Now, with that said, because we have these prevailing winds coming to the east and a little bit north, anything to the southwest is a concern, right? And that's a lot of basically Century Drive, the road up to Mount Bachelor. If we get a fire between here and Mount Bachelor, that's a huge concern for us. That's a huge concern for neighboring communities like Widgie Creek, which is just on the outskirts, just on the southwest, basically right along Century, and then marching its way up towards Tethero and then Westgate, Tree Farm, those neighborhoods. If it came over like through Shevlin, like we had a fire there not too long ago, that's a concern. And so that's the big thing you need to think about if you're, researching fire around Bend, is a lot of times it depends on where it is. So it's not just any fire around Bend is a concern. Obviously that's the case to some extent, but the big area that we're really concerned about is if a fire pops off southwest of town, right? So that's what you want to be aware of. Okay, and so to illustrate this wind event situation, let me tell you a little story. Back in 2020, on the other side of the Cascades, the west side of the Cascades, traditionally the wet side of the Cascades, but also the jungle side of the Cascades, where you have just like this thick canopy of red cedars chock full of oil, cottonwoods, big leaf maples, beautiful trees, but also just so much fuel that can burn. So back in 2020, we had the Holiday Farm Fire, which started in McKenzie Bridge about 6 p.m. It was like in September. I think it was right before Labor Day. And it, unknown exactly how it started. A lot of people think it was because a power line fell, sparked a little quarter-acre fire. But because we had these big wind event at the same time, which is, what caused the power lines to fall, which is still unconfirmed for some odd reason. But anyways, that fire started, but we had these big winds coming from the east blowing west, and started at 6 o'clock, and within 3 hours had already spread to Blue River, which is about 7 or 8 miles to the west, and burned pretty much all the way through Blue River, which is a town. I mean, I think we lost overnight, we basically lost 170,000 acres that were burned. That's the power of this wind, because we had 30 to 50 mile an hour winds with 70 mile an hour gusts just blowing it straight down that river canyon, covering about 30 miles of river valley, and completely burned the whole town of Blue River, all the cabins, farms, and homesteads along the river, totaling about 500 homes just lost that night. Propane tanks exploding. I mean, it was scary. Really scary, and everybody for the most part was lucky to get out of there, but it's still terrifying. And it's only been in the last year or two that the valley is starting to green up again, right? Because it was just charred with just chimneys standing for years, and now people are rebuilding and overcoming it. But it's traumatic, and it leaves a trauma with people who have deeply experienced it. So it's nothing to shake a stick at. So that's the power of wind. Okay, so the question is, could Bend ever burn through? And yes, it can, but I think it's unlikely. But it still can. So again, I don't have a crystal ball, but in the last 35 years, there have been 2 fires that have threatened Bend. So let's talk about the first one, or really the most recent one, and that's the Two Bulls Fire, which started at Bull Springs. There were 2 of them, so they named it the Two Bulls Fire. So in June of 2014, the Two Bulls Fire burned nearly 6,900 acres just west of the city near the Tumalo Reservoir. Came within about 3 miles of downtown, and about 250 homes and roughly 600 odd people on the west side were evacuated. I've talked to people here at the time, and they describe, they had to pack their cars in the middle of the night. And the scariest thing in it all is you don't know if you're going to have a house to come back to. I mean, that's a big deal. Even if it's covered by insurance, that's still a scary prospect and nothing to blink at. So that's the thing, right? You have to be aware. And that was 12 years ago. And if we go back further to 1990, we have the Aubrey Hall Fire. And that's one a lot of folks still remember, right? Because this is, if you're looking to buy or even just play golf in Tethero, there's a reason Tethero has this look about it where it's high desert, sagebrush. And the reason is we had a fire come through there and burn that forest, right? So before Tethero was built, it was forest. That fire came through, and then Tethro was built. So that fire was 1990. That's only 36 years ago, back when I had hair. It's a big deal. Okay, I'll stop making hair jokes. Maybe, probably not. Anyways, the big deal here is it started on a ridge in Shevlin Park, jumped some major roads, crossed the Deschutes, and traveled 6 miles. 22 homes total were destroyed. I mean, it was a big fire, and that's only 35 years ago, right? So this isn't like a once in 100 years kind of thing. It's happening more often, and we just don't know how severe it's going to be. But what we do know is that we prepared differently than we did back then. Back then, the common aesthetic was wood shakes, right? You saw a lot of wood siding, and you saw a lot of houses full of quote unquote undefensible space. Now we've wised up. We know how important it is to protect our home with a good hat and like metal roofing. We look at the hardy plank siding because it's concrete, not burnable. Don't do gutters because the gutters can catch ashes, and then the ashes light, say whatever's in the gutters, and then it works its way up into the underlayment and burns the house down that way. And then for people who are getting really sophisticated, one, obviously everybody's doing defensible space, so nothing burnable within, 20, 40, as much space as you can fathom, as much space as you can manage. And then similarly, some people, and what's starting to happen, and if you want to invest in a company or start a company, start it around putting seasonal sprinklers on top of roofs that you can just turn on and walk away from the house, because that's the biggest thing that can protect a house, is to have a steady, consistent stream of water flowing down the roofs. So these are big things to be aware of. We're seeing these sprinkler systems just starting to occur, but personally, having a place in McKenzie Bridge and having had to evacuate and set up makeshift sprinklers on my roof, I think it's a great system to have in place if you want to invest the money there. So those are the two biggest fires here in Bend over the last 35 years. So then this gets to the next question. Where are we at the higher risk of fire? And it's really just comes down to anywhere you're in the quote unquote wildland urban interface. They call it the WU zone. Anywhere where you're close to the big ponderosas, anywhere you're close to the national forest and close to town, because anywhere you're on that edge, you get a big fire in the forest coming your way, you're going to be close to it, right? So places like southwest of town, right? We're talking about Deschutes River Woods. We're talking about Southwest Bend. We're talking about Widgie Creek, even Tree Farm, Tethro to some extent. These are all areas that can burn. So all that to say, places can burn. The closer you are to the forest, the more at risk you are. That's just the way it goes. So with this big unknown, how do we handle it? And personally, because of the catastrophe that it would be if Bend burned, I know there would be a tremendous amount of resources to put out any starts that put Bend at risk. But of course, it's still a wildfire. Like with this Akawa Butte fire working towards Sisters, it's not like they were sitting there ready and able to protect Sisters. It's like they knew that if that wind picked up and consistently south, Sisters would burn. That's just the way it goes. So I think it's unlikely Bend would burn, but I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule anything out. Just the same way we're seeing Spokane burn, we're seeing, Paradise, California burn. It can happen. So with that unknown, how do you make a wise purchase with the risk your house could burn? Insurance is the name of the game here. And quite simply, if you can get it and afford it, you're fine. And if not, don't buy. That's quite simply the way it goes, right? There's more to it than that, but that's the simple truth of it. So start with USAA if you qualify, and then go to State Farm, Farmers, and anyone else that'll give you a quote. And if you can't get one from them, which I certainly experience, give me a call. I got a few aces up my sleeve here in town, and I'm happy to make the right connection for the right context for you, especially as we get into the higher net worth properties. We've been looking at some $2, $3, $4 million houses that don't get conventional insurance, but I got some folks who can make things happen for you. So give me a call. It's no problem at all. And speaking of giving me a call, if I haven't completely dissuaded you from moving here to Bend, and you're looking to move here in 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, give me a call. We'll get you on the right path for finding the right home in the right neighborhood the first time around, okay? And speaking of right neighborhoods, make sure you check out my new neighborhood quiz that'll help place you in the proper neighborhood the first time around. Scan the QR code and click the link in the description. The quiz isn't perfect yet, but I'd love your feedback so I can continue to improve it. Check it out, and there we go. Okay, and one more thing on insurance. Roughly speaking, plan to spend around $2,000 per year of a $1 million home valuation. This is incredibly rough. It can be way less, way more, but a fine benchmark to start thinking about. And as always, absolutely get confirmation that you can get insurance before your due diligence period is up when you're purchasing a home. Okay, so we talked about fires, we talked about insurance, and yes, a fire may burn your house down, but the insurance company would pay for it, and this place, quite frankly, is too good from a lifestyle perspective So we take the risk, and here we are. So next up we have the question, the fire may not get me, but how bad is the smoke? And it really just depends who you ask. And if you ask Luke Bryan, who performed last night, he'd say, I got the black lung, pop, help. You know, he actually cut some of his songs short and had his band head off the stage at one point, and it wasn't even that smoky out. A lot of us were a little surprised and a little disappointed at that. I think maybe we're just jaded, but I think that really speaks to what I experienced, where the people who live here, not nonplussed by the smoke, they certainly, like may travel or may stay inside more, but aren't as concerned with it, I would say, as people from out of town. I think out of town folks, it's such a new phenomenon that you're like, oh my gosh, can't go outside. I need to wear the mask or whatever it is. And especially if you have breathing issues, it's 1,000% valid. It's all valid. Like, it's your lungs. You want to take care of them. But the nature of the beast here is that because, you can expect 20 plus days of smoke, if not more, on any given summer here in Bend, it's just a reality you deal with. For better or worse, if you're thinking about moving here, the smoke is real. And the fire's scary too. And it's a big deal, and it's something that you have to be at peace with, right? And when you live here, it's a bit smoky some days, and you deal with it and move on. And to be frank, like, that's how I think about the East Coast. I'm an outsider from the East Coast. It seems like sweet, but I love to hang out in the woods and go mushroom hunting and all the things. And I don't want to get Lyme disease. I don't want to get alpha-gal disease where I can't eat meat anymore. So these ticks terrify me much more than wildfire does. Or hurricanes down in Florida. Like, that's a real deal. That's scary. But again, I'm an outsider. I don't know it. Like, somebody who lives there is like, it's not a big deal. Just get over it, right? So at some point you got to choose what natural disaster you want to be okay with and deal with it and move on, right? So a little bit more about the smoke. It's been pretty benign here in Bend thus far this year, but our friends up in Prineville, due east off Sisters Akawa Butte Fire, they've been getting hammered with the smoke for the last few weeks because all that smoke has been going straight east, and they've been up in the 400s, and that's brutal, right? So for me, the threshold is kind of around that 200 AQI. Anything below that, I'm not too worried about it. Anything above that, I notice it. Well, for me, what it is, when I get that headache on my third eye, then I'm like, okay, I need to wear a mask or a buff and be prepared. But that's kind of the litmus test for me. But again, I'm a brute, so take it with a grain of salt, right? And then, while we have a ton of fires here in Central Oregon, back like Eugene, Salem, Portland, Seattle, they've had worse smoke than we've had the last few days because of which way the wind's blowing, right? So I've been at my cabin in McKenzie Bridge where we've had a fire 5 miles away, and it's been perfectly clear air because the smoke's blowing the other way. So it's just whichever way the wind blows, So in summary, with all the fire and smoke factors, how do I approach it? For me personally, yes, the fire and the smoke is a downside, but not nearly big enough to not live here. To be totally frank, I still pinch myself every day because of what a great place this is to live. I was talking with a friend at Munchin Music last night, and it's just such a great community. You're walking around, you see a bunch of people great music, great food. It's just lively atmosphere. Everybody's happy and healthy, and it's a sweet place. People are friendly, active, healthy. Kids are riding their bikes around free like it's the 90s, something that my clients comment on all day, every day. They're like, I'm not used to seeing kids free ranging on bikes. What's going on here? What's the deal with this place? What am I missing, right? And it's the real deal. Like, this is a special place. And I, as a van lifer friend of mine that's traveled all over the country and the world looking for the perfect place to set roots, he says, yes, this place is smoky sometimes, but there's nowhere else he'd rather be, right? And that's how I feel too. So there you have it. Fire's scary. Smoke is inconvenient. We still have insurance. So I hope this has been helpful. This is my true, honest take. And if you still have more questions, give me a call anytime, and I'll be happy to give you my take on it. And as always, if you like this video, thumbs up, subscribe, share it with your friends. And until next time, I'm Luke Callahan. I'll see you in the next one.